Welcome to his little memoir. Tonight's story begins at a graduation ceremony, where a powerful man's past walks straight into his present. It was supposed to be just another public appearance for billionaire Ethan Cole, as the keynote speaker at one of the country's top business schools. He was confident, polished, prepared. He stepped onto the campus stage with his usual charm. The crowd applauded. Cameras flashed. His speech was in his hand. Everything was in control. Until it wasn't. Because right there, in the third row, he saw her, Ava Sinclair, his ex-secretary, wearing a graduation gown, with a little boy beside her, a boy who looked about 5 or 6 years old, and whose eyes looked exactly like Ethan's. His breath caught. The applause faded in his ears. His grip tightened on the podium. She wasn't supposed to be here. She had vanished 5 years ago. No goodbye. No explanation. Just a letter left on her desk. Ethan had tried to forget her. But seeing her now, sitting tall and proud, smiling softly as she held that child, it was like no time had passed. And yet, everything had changed. The boy turned to look at her. He said something. She laughed. Ethan's heart thudded in his chest. Could it be? Was that boy his? He shook his head, trying to refocus. This was not the place. Not the time. Not the way. But his hands trembled. And when he finally stepped up to the microphone, his voice cracked. He began his speech anyway. The words felt heavy. Success isn't about what you gain, he read aloud. It's about what you sacrifice. A cruel irony. He looked up. She was watching him. Unflinching. Unapologetic. Stronger. She wasn't the same woman he remembered. She had grown, flourished, and built something he didn't even know existed. A life. A degree. Maybe even a family. He hadn't just lost a secretary. He had lost something much deeper. His eyes burned. Not from stage lights, but from everything he didn't say. Everything he didn't know. As he finished his speech, his voice was steady, but his soul unraveled. And when Ava stood to accept her diploma, the crowd clapped again. But Ethan only saw her. Saw her walk proudly. Saw the little boy cheer. Saw what he might have missed. As she stepped off the stage, she didn't look back. But she didn't have to, because when their eyes met again, he knew. This story was far from over. It was only just beginning. It started, like most corporate fairy tales do, with a resume. Ava Sinclair was 24 years old when she first walked into Cole and Langston Holdings. Her suit was 2 years out of fashion, her heels slightly worn, and her resume flawless. Not because it had Ivy League credentials, but because it screamed hunger, precision, purpose. Ethan Cole noticed that instantly. He'd read 100 resumes that week, and forgotten them all. But hers stuck. Not because she had a perfect GPA. Not even because of her glowing references. But because of the cover letter. One sentence had caught his eye. I don't want to work for you because I need a job. I want to work for you because I want to see how power breathes. It was bold, direct, a little dangerous. Ethan, at that point in time, wasn't just the CEO. He was an empire builder. 38 years old. Ruthless. Impatient. Allergic to nonsense. The kind of man who fired 3 executives before lunch and closed multi-million-dollar deals before coffee turned cold. But Ava? She didn't flinch in his presence. She didn't flatter him either. In her first interview, when he asked, "Why finance?" she simply said, "Because I'm tired of watching people who look like me get handed rejection letters by people who look like you." Silence. Then Ethan laughed. Loudly. For the first time in a month. He hired her that day. Not as a junior analyst, like HR recommended, but as his personal secretary. People whispered about it, of course. The board didn't understand. Neither did his peers. But Ava understood something they didn't. She knew how to observe. She watched everything. Every smirk. Every hesitation in a meeting. Every slip of the tongue. That revealed which executive was lying. And which one was merely lost. She became more than a secretary. She became his quiet weapon. And that was dangerous. Because somewhere between the midnight files and the 2 a.m. call-ins, silence turned into intimacy. And intimacy turned into silence again. The kind that builds walls instead of breaking them down. The kind that fills the air between two people who speak with their eyes more than their mouths. The kind that never says I want you, but always says don't leave. Ethan never crossed the line. Not officially. But there were moments that lived only in the space between words. Like the night his father died. Ethan hadn't cried since he was 15. But she brought him a whiskey glass and simply stood beside him on the balcony. Neither of them spoke, but he remembered her hand, resting for a moment on his back. That night, the city looked small, and she looked infinite. But he said nothing, and so did she. Weeks turned into months. Ava became indispensable. She knew Ethan's moods better than his doctors, his needs better than his investors. She scheduled meetings like a war general, not just by availability, but by political temperature. She knew when to cancel, when to delay, and when to throw someone to the wolves. But more than anything, she listened. When he ranted about competitors, she listened. When he mumbled strategies while pacing at 1 a.m., she took notes. When he stared out the window too long, she brought him coffee, strong and black. Just how he hated to admit he liked it. There was no romance, not in the traditional sense, but there was heat, and tension, and something else. Respect. That dangerous kind of respect that made people weak. One Thursday night, around 10 p.m., the cleaning crew had already left. Ava was still at her desk, typing furiously on an urgent quarterly report. Ethan came out of his office, no tie, shirt sleeves rolled, eyes tired but sharp. He leaned against the frame. "You ever go home?" he asked, quietly. She didn't stop typing. "You ever sleep?" He smiled. "Touché." She paused, looked up. "Do you need something?" "Yes," he said. "Dinner." She blinked. "Are you asking me?" He shrugged. "My driver's waiting downstairs. There's a place still open on Madison." She didn't answer immediately. Then she shut her laptop. "Fine. But only if I pick the wine." They never made it to the restaurant. Instead, they ended up walking, talking, laughing. The cold Manhattan air biting through their coats, as if trying to keep them professional. But walls fell. Just a little. That night, she told him about her mother, a nurse who worked double shifts, and still found time to read poetry aloud. In their tiny living room, he told her about his brother, a recovering addict, living in a cabin upstate. And then it happened. Outside her apartment building, the street was empty. Snow had started to fall. He looked at her too long. She looked back. No kiss. No touching. Just two people standing too close, with everything between them unspoken. Ava broke it first. "Good night, Mr. Cole." His name had never felt more like a wall. He didn't sleep that night. And the next day, he was colder, sharper, business only. And so was she. But something had shifted, and no memo could undo it. The following weeks were a study in restraint. Ethan buried himself in work. Ava buried herself in precision. Meetings ran like clockwork. Reports were flawless. Conversations were crisp. And yet, the air between them, charged. Ava started wearing her hair up again. Tighter. More professional. Ethan stopped calling her into his office late at night. He stopped lingering after meetings. Everything returned to normal. Except, it didn't. One morning, She arrived earlier than usual, and found him already there. The lights were off in his office, but the blinds were open. He sat in his chair, staring at a file, unmoving. She knocked gently. "You okay?" He looked up, eyes shadowed. "Do you think I'm a good man?" he asked. Ava blinked. "What?" Ethan stood, walked to the window. "Don't answer that. I don't think I want to know." But she did answer. "You're not a good man," she said. "You're a dangerous one. But you don't pretend to be good. That makes you better than most." He turned. Their eyes locked, and something cracked inside him. He stepped forward, then stopped. "You should go home early today," he said. "Take the afternoon." She nodded, left without another word. But that night, he couldn't focus, couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, because the truth was, he didn't want her to go home. He wanted her to stay, to sit on the couch in his office, and read her poetry like her mother did, to pour him coffee, not because it was her job, but because she knew he needed it. But he didn't ask, and she didn't offer, because the line between them wasn't just professional. It was made of secrets, his and hers. 2 weeks later, at the company retreat in Vermont, that line would snap. The ceremony had ended. The graduates had tossed their caps. Families were taking photos. Professors were hugging. Champagne popped in plastic cups. Somewhere, a jazz band had started playing near the fountain. But Ethan Cole didn't hear any of it. He was frozen, stuck on the image that haunted him from 20 minutes ago, her. Ava Sinclair. Still beautiful. Still unreadable. Still dangerous. And that child. He couldn't stop staring at the boy. Even though the crowd had long since swallowed him and Ava both. There was something in the boy's jawline. A tension. A shape. It matched the one Ethan saw in the mirror every morning when he shaved. He told himself he was being paranoid, that it was coincidence. But Ethan Cole didn't believe in coincidence. He was a man who built an empire on data, on patterns, on risk mitigation. And right now, his entire nervous system was screaming that something was wrong. Or maybe, something had been wrong for 5 years. He turned to leave the courtyard. "Mr. Cole," someone called out behind him. A professor with glasses too big and a handshake too eager. Ethan shook the man's hand, smiled just enough for photos, nodded through compliments he didn't register. His eyes scanned the crowd the entire time. Where did she go? Had she seen him? She must have. That smile. It had been real. Small, but real. Not triumphant. Not bitter. Almost grateful. As if she had needed him to see her. Needed him to know she existed again. He excused himself and left the professors behind, cutting across the field toward the parking lot. That's when he saw her. Or rather, saw the flash of her navy gown, slipping into the side entrance of the library building. She was alone now. No child in sight. Instinct kicked in. Ethan followed. The hallway was quiet, carpeted, dim. He took each step, like he was walking through a dream he hadn't prepared for. When he turned the corner, she was there, standing in front of the elevator, waiting. Her back was to him. For a moment, he said nothing, just watched. She shifted her weight, adjusted her gown. The elevator dinged. She turned and saw him. Her breath caught visibly. She didn't move. Neither did he. "Hi," he said finally. "Hi," she replied. Simple. Like 5 years hadn't happened. Like they were still colleagues. At 11:53 p.m., wrapping up reports. He didn't know what to say next. So she did. "You look well," Ava said softly. He didn't answer that. "Wasn't expecting to see you," she added. "Same," he replied. Another silence. The elevator doors opened behind her. Neither of them moved. And then he asked it, the question clawing at his throat. The boy, is he yours? Her eyes flashed, just for a second. But she didn't look away. Yes, she said. His heart thundered. Is he mine? He asked, barely more than a whisper. Ava took a breath. And then, the elevator doors closed behind her, without her stepping in. No, she said. A beat. But that doesn't mean you're not part of the story. Then she turned and walked away, leaving Ethan cold in the hallway, with more questions than before. The library hallway was still echoing in Ethan's mind long after she disappeared. He stood there, frozen, long after Ava turned that corner. No, she had said. But what did that mean? No, he wasn't the father. No, he didn't deserve the truth. Or, no, she wasn't ready to tell him. His hands were shaking. It had been years since something unbalanced him this way. Not since the stock market crash of 2019. Not since his mother's funeral. Ava's presence, her return, had reopened something in him. A place he thought had been sealed in marble and cement. And now, it was bleeding. By the time he returned to his car, his driver was already waiting with the door open. Back to the city, Mr. Cole, the man asked politely. Ethan didn't answer. He was staring at the campus. No. Wait here, he said finally, and stepped away from the car. He wasn't done. Not even close. Ethan made his way toward the administration building. His steps fast. Calculated. Inside, a secretary greeted him with a nervous smile. Can I help you? I need a list of today's graduates, Ethan said calmly, including anyone registered under the name Ava Sinclair. The woman blinked. I'm sorry, sir, but we don't give out private student information. He leaned forward just slightly. Not threatening. Just deliberate. My foundation donated $3 million to this university last year. I'd hate to think I need to reconsider next year's pledge. The woman swallowed. 1 minute later, she handed him a printed sheet. Ethan scanned it quickly. There she was. Ava Sinclair, Bachelor of Social Work, graduating with honors. He paused, and then frowned. There was another name listed next to hers. Family escort, Jason E. Holloway. His stomach turned. Jason. The name wasn't familiar, but the implication burned in his brain. Who the hell was Jason? Back in the car, Ethan pulled out his phone and opened his private security contacts. If there was one thing he was good at, it was getting information. He dialed the number without hesitation. Alex, he said as soon as it connected. I need a full file on someone named Jason Holloway. Cross-reference with Ava Sinclair. Priority 1. The voice on the other end didn't ask questions. Ethan didn't like games. But this felt like a game someone else was playing. And he wasn't invited to the table. And he hated that. He hated not knowing. Especially when it came to her. The invitation came on a Tuesday, delivered in a cream-colored envelope, with gold embossing and heavy cardstock. Ethan almost threw it away. He didn't attend community events. Not anymore. Not since the headlines. Not since the world turned every photo into a headline, and every glance into a scandal. But something about the name on the host committee caught his eye. Jason Holloway. A local youth initiative. Scholarship fundraising. Guest speaker, Ava Sinclair. He didn't blink. He didn't hesitate. He called his assistant and told her to RSVP. That Saturday night, the hotel ballroom glowed with chandeliers, and the kind of laughter money couldn't fake. Ethan arrived early, dressed in black on black. Silent. Measured. He wasn't there to network. He was there to watch. And there she was. Across the room. Ava. She wore navy blue. Elegant. Modest. Her curls pinned back with gold clips. She didn't sparkle. Not in the traditional sense. She burned, low and steady. Next to her stood Jason, comfortable, present, smiling. He placed a hand on her back, barely. But the touch was there. Familiar, casual, real. And Ethan? He felt every inch of it. Like a punch to the throat. He didn't approach. Not yet. Instead, he let himself simmer, drowning in the clinks of glasses and the background jazz. That felt far too cheerful. When Ava finally took the stage to speak, the room fell quiet, and Ethan forgot to breathe. "Thank you for having me," she began, her voice steady. "5 years ago, I was scared. I was broke. And I was pregnant." Murmurs rippled, but she kept going. "I didn't know how to build a life, but someone handed me a brochure for a program, a counselor, a man who didn't ask questions about my past, only what I wanted my future to be." She looked down at the front row, at Jason. He told me I wasn't broken. Just paused. The crowd chuckled softly. And that's what this place became to me. A pause. Before a chapter one never thought I'd be strong enough to write. She smiled. Now I get to help others turn pages. Because someone helped me hold the pen. Applause. Standing ovation. Tears. Ethan stood there, stone still. And then Jason walked to the stage. Took the mic. And smiled. "At least once a week," he said. "Ava brings me cold coffee, and I still drink it. That's what I call loyalty." Laughter. The kind Ethan had never earned. The kind Jason wore like a second skin. Ethan turned and walked to the bar. He needed air. He needed a reset. He needed her to look at him like she used to, before 5 years of silence rewrote who they were. Ethan didn't drink. He held the glass like a shield, but the liquid stayed untouched. Behind him, the ballroom swelled with chatter, laughter, toasts. He stayed still, facing the window, staring out at the street below, until he heard her voice. "You came." He turned. Ava. Closer than he expected. Calm. Still blowing from her speech. But there was a question in her eyes. "I did," he said. "Why?" He hesitated. "I needed to see it for myself," he replied. "The life you made. The person you became." She nodded, slowly. "I wasn't hiding, Ethan." "I know," he said. "But I wasn't looking either." A beat. Then she walked closer. No anger. No fear. Just truth. "You were never supposed to be part of that chapter," she said quietly. He took a breath. "Maybe not. But I'm here now." "Now," she echoed. "When everything's finally settled. When he calls Jason Dad in public." Ethan's face tightened. "Does he know?" "Only what matters," she said. "That he's loved. Safe. Whole." Silence again. Then Ethan said the thing that scraped against his pride like sandpaper. "I don't know how to fix this." She met his gaze, steady. "Maybe you're not supposed to." That landed like a slap. "But," she added, "that doesn't mean you don't get to try." Outside, rain started tapping the windows. Ava glanced toward the ballroom. "They're probably looking for me." He nodded. "Will I see you again?" he asked. She paused. "Maybe," she said, "if you're not just trying to chase ghosts." And with that, she left. Not storming. Not fleeing. Just walking away. Like she had 5 years ago. Only this time, Ethan didn't just watch her go. He watched himself stay. And somewhere, in the space between regret and reality, he realized something had already begun to change. It had been 12 days since the gala. 12 days since Ava's heels clicked away from him through the marble hallway. 12 days of silence. And Ethan hated it. He hated that he noticed the date. He hated that he checked his phone every morning, with a sliver of hope and a mountain of restraint. But more than anything, he hated the feeling he couldn't name. It wasn't jealousy. Not exactly. It was absence. And absence had never felt this loud. On day 13, he took a risk. He didn't text her. He didn't call. He called the school instead. Cole Langston funded over 3 dozen education programs in the city. One of them happened to be the elementary school in Ava's district. It wasn't illegal. It wasn't even inappropriate. But it was personal. He scheduled a site visit for philanthropic outreach and arrived at 10:02 a.m. Suit sharp, jaw set, guilt buried deep beneath rationalization. He didn't ask to see Carter. He didn't need to, because Carter found him first. The boy was standing in the hallway outside the art room. Small, focused, holding a half-finished sketch in his hand. Ethan slowed as he walked by. Carter looked up. "Hi," the boy said plainly. Ethan froze. This close. There was no room for denial. He had Ava's eyes. But his chin, his shoulders, they were his. Ethan cleared his throat. "Hi there. You're tall," the boy noted. "And you're observant." A shrug. "Mom says I asked too many questions." Ethan smiled. "That's not a bad thing." Carter tilted his head. "Are you here for the principal?" "In a way," Ethan said. A pause. Then the boy extended his drawing. It was a picture of a bridge. Crude, but detailed. "Do you think this looks strong enough?" he asked. Ethan studied it. "The supports are a little uneven," he said gently. "But the idea is smart." Carter nodded seriously. "I wanted it to hold 2 people." Ethan blinked. 2 people. He swallowed. "That's a good goal." They stood in silence. And for a second, Ethan forgot how complicated this was. Because this little boy, this boy who wasn't supposed to exist in his world, just looked at him and said, "You remind me of someone, but I don't know who." Ethan didn't respond. He couldn't. Carter just tilted his head again and looked up at him, curious but unafraid. Then, voices from the hallway. Ava's voice. Sharp. Alert. "Carter? Sweetheart?" Carter turned. "In here, Mom." Her footsteps came fast. Then she appeared in the doorway. She froze. Her eyes went straight to Carter. Then to the sketch. Then to Ethan. For 1 second, her whole face dropped. Not in fear. In disbelief. "What are you doing here?" she asked. Voice low, controlled. Carter looked between them. "You 2 know each other?" Ava crouched beside him. "Go back to class, baby. I'll be right there." Carter didn't argue. Just handed her the sketch, nodded at Ethan, and walked away. Silence. Ava didn't stand. She stayed crouched, staring at the drawing in her hand. "I didn't plan this," Ethan said. She exhaled a laugh. Dry. Not amused. "No. But you executed it perfectly. I wanted to see the school." "No. You wanted to see him." Ethan stayed quiet. She finally stood, the drawing still in her fingers. "He likes bridges," she said. Ethan nodded. "He said he wanted it to hold 2 people." Her eyes flicked to him, softened, then hardened. "That's not a metaphor, Ethan. Don't turn it into one." "I'm not trying to." "You're not trying not to either." She walked past him toward the window, holding the sketch like a fragile truth. "He doesn't need confusion right now," she said. "He doesn't need, maybe." Ethan's voice lowered. "And what do you need, Ava?" She turned, and for the first time in years, he saw it. The tiredness behind her eyes, the weight behind her spine, the fire behind her survival. She didn't answer, because she didn't have to. It started with a drawing. Carter had always been a doodler. Spaceships, trees, the occasional dragon. But this one was different. It was a window, and behind the window, a man. Just a shape at first. Then the next day, ice. Then a jawline. Then a suit. His teacher had asked about it. Carter had shrugged. He's just watching, he said simply. He doesn't knock. At home, Ava found the drawing in his backpack. Her chest tightened. It looked like Ethan. More than she wanted to admit. Jason was cooking dinner. Humming something soft. She didn't say anything. She just folded the paper and tucked it into the junk drawer beneath a pile of coupons and expired batteries. That night, Carter didn't sleep well. He kicked under the covers, sat up twice, once to check the window. The second time, he didn't say. But Ava heard him whisper something. So quiet, she wasn't even sure it was real. I think I know him. Meanwhile, Ethan sat in his car. 3 blocks away. Not stalking. Not really. He had driven there by muscle memory. He didn't even know what he was hoping to see. A shadow? A flicker? A sign that what he felt during those 5 minutes in the school hallway wasn't imagined? But the lights were off. The apartment windows still. And eventually, he drove away. He didn't see Carter peeking out through the curtain. And Carter didn't wave. But he didn't close the curtain either. He just stood there, watching the stranger who always watched him. Jason noticed the silence first. Not the kind that fills a quiet room, but the kind that pulses under a smile, tightens around the edges of a hug, hums in the space between footsteps. Ava was quiet. Too quiet. And Carter was curious. Too curious. At dinner, he pushed peas around his plate and asked, "Do you remember my dad?" Jason's fork paused midair. Ava looked up. Jason answered first. "I remember that you don't have one." Carter frowned. "But I mean, before you. Did I have someone?" Ava reached for her water. "Carter, we've talked about this. You have us. That's enough." But Carter didn't drop it. "He looked like you," he said, "but also not." Jason laughed gently. "That's how mirrors work, buddy." But Carter wasn't smiling. And Ava wasn't drinking. And Jason, he started listening harder. Later that night, after Carter was asleep, Jason found Ava on the balcony. She was barefoot, wrapped in a robe, holding a mug of tea she hadn't sipped. "Did something happen?" he asked. She didn't turn around. "Why? You've been elsewhere." A pause. Then she said, "Do you ever feel like the past is just standing behind you, waiting for you to notice it?" Jason stepped closer. "No," he said. "I think the past doesn't need to be behind you to wreck your present." She turned then, and he saw it. That flicker of something too familiar. Something he didn't recognize, but didn't like. He didn't ask more. He just touched her arm and left her alone, because whatever she was carrying, it wasn't ready to be shared. Yet, the room smelled like old cigars and newer money. It always did. That was the signature scent of the Lexington Club, where deals were made without phones, and betrayals came wrapped in napkins, folded by hand. Ethan hadn't been back in nearly 2 years. But tonight, he needed a distraction. Or a sign. Maybe both. He wasn't supposed to see Gregory Miles. But he did. And Gregory saw him. "Langston," the man barked. "You're still breathing." "Good." Ethan didn't smile. "Disappointed?" Gregory laughed. "Not at all. You made my wife very happy." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "I don't remember sleeping with her." "You didn't," Gregory said. "But your exit gave her a promotion." That was Gregory. Petty. Brilliant. Brutally well-informed. They drank. They traded false pleasantries. And then, Gregory said something he shouldn't have. "You remember Ava Sloan?" Ethan's hand tightened around his glass. "I do. She used to come to meetings with you. Hair in a bun. Notepad always ready." Ethan stayed silent. Gregory smiled. She was smart. Smarter than you let her be. Still, Ethan didn't speak. Then Gregory leaned in, voice lower. Ever wonder why she left? Right before the Langley deal went public? Ethan's heart slowed. What do you mean? Gregory tilted his glass. She knew, somehow, that the merger would tank your liquidity. She got out just in time. Ethan stared. She didn't even sell any stock, Gregory added. She just vanished. Later, in his car, Ethan couldn't stop replaying it. It was nonsense. It had to be. But if it wasn't, then Ava had known more than she said. About him. About the company. About everything. And for the first time, he wasn't just angry at himself. He was angry at her. The message came at 11:43 p.m. Ava wasn't snooping. She wasn't. Jason had left his phone charging on the nightstand. The screen lit up as she passed by, on her way to refill Carter's humidifier. One line. No contact name. Just, she doesn't know. But she's close. Her hand stopped mid-reach. She stared at the words, her mind racing ahead of her breath. Then the screen dimmed. She didn't ask him about it. Not that night. Not the next. But something shifted. Every smile felt like a test. Every kiss like a disguise. Every silence like a secret passed between ghosts. And Jason? He noticed. Meanwhile, Ethan was digging. Not with force. Not with access. But with instinct. He had Ava's last HR report. Her old extension. An archived folder that hadn't been deleted after she left. He wasn't looking for betrayal. He was looking for a key. What had she been working on? Before the Langley deal fell through? He found it. A note. One she'd written to herself. Just 6 words. Check contracts, Langley versus Claremont overlap. Overlap? Claremont had sued Langston Industries. A year after that merger failed. Claimed intellectual infringement. It was settled quietly. No one in the media had even caught it. But Ava had known. Somehow, Ethan sat back in his chair. Either she'd protected him from a collapse, or she'd watched him fall. With open eyes. Back in the apartment, Ava finally asked. They were brushing teeth. Jason humming. Ava quiet. She said, Is there something I should know? He froze, mid-rinse. About what? She met his eyes in the mirror. You tell me. And in that reflection, he didn't smile. He didn't lie. He just said, Not yet. The knock came at 7:12 a.m. Ethan was already awake. He hadn't slept. Too many memories had risen like smoke from the files he'd opened. But this knock, was not expected. He opened the door in bare feet, a mug of untouched coffee still warm in his hand. And there she was, Lucille Langston, his mother. Her eyes were sharper than the rumors, her pearls realer than the gossip, and her voice, still cold enough to curdle cream. I need 10 minutes, she said. Then you can go back to brooding. Ethan stepped aside without a word. She walked in like she owned the apartment. Because once upon a time, she had. She placed a slim envelope on the table. I found it while sorting old records, she said. No idea why I kept it. Ethan didn't touch it. Lucille arched an eyebrow. I thought it was time you saw what you ignored. He finally opened it. Inside, a photo. Faded. Frayed. Ava. At a gala. 5 years ago. Smiling. And beside her, a man Ethan didn't recognize. But he recognized the lapel pin. Langston Industries Board of Ethics. Lucille sipped the coffee Ethan hadn't touched. He was on our oversight panel, she said. Assigned to monitor the Langley-Claremont merger. That photo was taken 2 weeks before Ava quit. Ethan stared. Why didn't I know this? Lucille looked up. Because you don't listen. She set down the cup. Or because you didn't want to believe. that the woman who left you might have had a reason. Meanwhile, Ava stood in front of a building she hadn't visited in 6 years. A red brick townhouse, surrounded by ivy and regret. Carter was tugging at her hand. "Is this a museum?" he asked. She almost laughed. "No," she said. "It's where your grandmother used to live." Carter blinked. "I have a grandma?" "You had one." They went inside. Dust met them like an old friend. The furniture was covered. The rooms were silent. But the memories? They screamed. Ava walked slowly to the piano. She lifted the cover, revealing yellowing keys. Carter pressed one. The note echoed sharp. "Did she teach you music?" he asked. "No," Ava said. "She taught me silence." And Carter, for once, said nothing. The letter was in the drawer, folded behind a stack of hymn books and a faded church bulletin. Ava didn't mean to find it, but once she did, she couldn't unsee it. It was addressed in her mother's hand. "To Ava, only when I'm gone." She sat on the piano bench and opened it with shaking fingers. "My dearest Ava, I know I was cruel, unyielding, unfair, but not without reason. You had a secret, and I had mine. You asked once who your father was. I told you he didn't matter. That wasn't true. He mattered more than anyone. He was married, powerful, respected, but he chose silence. I chose survival. And you chose independence. But the blood that runs in your son comes from more than you know. And if you're reading this, then you've met the man who holds the other half of your past. Be careful. His name is Langston." Ava stared at the letter. The bench creaked under her. She folded it once, then again. Then she burned it in the sink. Carter watched the flames curl and spit. "Was that a bad letter?" "No," she said. "Just a very old one." Meanwhile, Ethan was holding the same photograph. In the Lexington archives, Gregory had confirmed the man's name. Daniel Raines, former board ethics chair, and a ghost in every legal scandal Langston had buried. But he wasn't buried. He was teaching now, adjunct at a private law college. Ethan waited outside his lecture hall. And when the man emerged, "You owe me 5 years of answers," Ethan said. Raines blinked, tired, resigned. "And you owe Ava Sloan an apology." Jason was on the edge. He hadn't slept in 2 days. Work calls had gone unanswered, text messages unread. He was watching Ava drift, watching Carter grow curious, and watching the man he thought was gone begin to surface in all the wrong places. So he did something reckless. He made a call. "Yeah, it's me," he said. "I'm ready. Do it." He hung up. And for the first time in a decade, Jason turned back into the man he'd sworn he'd never be again. Rain. Of course it had to rain. Not the quiet kind. The dramatic kind. The kind that turns streetlights into smeared oil paintings. The kind that makes confessions feel cinematic. Ava stood at the edge of the bridge, umbrella useless against the wind. Carter asleep in the back seat of her car behind her. Jason pacing in their apartment. Ethan walking toward her. He hadn't called. She hadn't expected him to. But he came. Ethan didn't stop walking until he stood beside her. No umbrella. No coat. Just the rain. And the weight of 1,000 unasked questions. "I read the letter," he said. Ava didn't look at him. "You weren't supposed to." "She burned it," he said. "But I know what it said." Now she turned. "You had no right." "I had every right," Ethan said. "You think I didn't deserve to know that my son—" She flinched. Silence. Then, "I didn't tell you," she said, "because it wasn't safe." "For who?" "For him." Back at the apartment, Jason was unlocking the drawer. Beneath the bookshelf. The drawer Ava never touched. The one she thought he'd sealed years ago. Inside, a gun, a phone with one number pre-programmed, and a photo of Ethan, crossed out in red ink. He dialed. A voice answered. Phase 1 is ready, Jason said. Make it public. And fast. Meanwhile, Carter was dreaming. Not of dinosaurs. Not of rocket ships. But of men arguing. One looked like Jason. One looked like Ethan. And Ava? She was crying. He woke with a gasp. Sat up in the car seat. Looked out the window. And saw his mom. In the rain. With the man from the photo album. On the bridge, Ethan was still speaking. I wasn't perfect. You left. I deserved that. But you don't get to erase me. Ava's voice cracked. I didn't erase you. I protected him from you. I didn't ask you to protect him from me. I asked you to trust me. And you didn't trust me either, she said. Lightning split the sky. They stood there. Two broken people, tethered by one small heartbeat, sleeping in the car behind them. They sat in the car. Ethan in the driver's seat now. Ava beside him. Carter in the back, awake but silent. Nobody spoke. The rain softened like a sigh from the sky. Ethan finally broke it. He looks like you. Ava didn't smile. He has your eyes, she said. And your stubbornness. That earned a half smile. Back in the apartment, Jason stared at his phone. Something was wrong. The news didn't break. The file wasn't uploaded. The number wasn't answering. He dialed again. And again. Static. Dead. Then, a knock. But not from the front door. The window. He turned. And saw Gregory. Ethan's right-hand man. Standing on the fire escape. Gregory stepped inside without invitation. You activated a dead protocol, he said. Ethan buried it for a reason. Jason's face went pale. You were never meant to access it. Jason stepped back. You don't understand. Gregory stepped forward. No, you don't. You broke the deal. And now, we clean up. He dropped a flash drive on the floor. Everything. Ethan's giving it all up. Back in the car, Carter finally spoke. Is he my dad? The question hit like thunder. Ava turned. Slow. Soft. Yes. Carter nodded. Then looked at Ethan. Do you want to be? Ethan's voice cracked. Yes. And in that silence, something unspoken healed. Later that night, Ava stood alone at the window. Ethan had taken Carter to the bookstore. Jason had left. No note. No goodbye. Just gone. The wind rattled the glass. And Ava, for the first time in years, didn't feel cold. Clapperboard end of chapter 10. Speech balloon, now it's your turn. Do you think Ava made the right choice? Should Carter grow up knowing both men? Let me know what you would do if you were in Ava's shoes. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Your story might inspire the next one. Until then, this has been his little memoir. Stay curious.